And we're back. Episode 2, Not Your Restaurant, the newly named podcast. Thanks again for joining, guys. We've got a special guest, Professor George, namesake and moniker for Fargo BJJ. So thanks again for joining us, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
So you're the first guest. Otherwise, it's been me and Matt gabbing away. So you're the illustrious first guest. No one better we could find.
Awesome.
I do things a little bit different than we have, obviously, bringing you on. And kind of one of the things that we wanted to do was, one, give you the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about your background, especially with, a lot of folks that are listening to this are going to be students and folks that are at the gym that are either, have been coming for a while or they're new to Fargo BJJ and they may not have a lot of the history and everything like that, and maybe not know you and kind of your and Sarah's background and kind of how you guys ended up in Fargo. So we just kind of put together some stuff and basically just kind of talk through everything with you.
All right, let's do it. Trying to get set up here. Sorry. I'm a rookie.
You're your own production manager, basically. Running everything.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my phone to not fall over. That's what's happening right now. Awesome.
All right. Yes, we got. Matt basically put together a little. Practically a questionnaire here that we can run you through. But basically,
yeah, I didn't look at it because I didn't want to like get too sucked into trying to come up with answers. I just wanted to be like off the cuff, really. So, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So to start out with, just tell us about you. Like, what give us an introduction about who you are. Granted, most of the people that are listening probably already know you, but it's probably fair that there's some new students maybe who seen you around the gym, but maybe don't know your full story like Rob and I do. So why don't you just tell us about you?
Well, man, I hate questions like that. I don't think I can all be like that.
That's why I sent you the questions, bro.
Just like I'm a dude from New Jersey.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm an old guy from New Jersey. I was just born and raised like right outside New York City, and yeah.
What's the pull of Colorado? I feel like every time I listen to a podcast that's in Colorado, one of the guys is from New Jersey. Is it just as soon as you're of age, you beat feet out of New Jersey, or what? What's going on?
No, I don't know about that. I think it's well, a lot of people go there for. Let's face it, it's beautiful over there.
It is.
It's spectacular. It's awesome, but I think you'd kind of just wind up there. I just wound up there. Like, I didn't go to Colorado specifically. I just went there because I had a job opportunity when I got out of the Army.
Oh.
I got out of the Army in '98. I was in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I've always been into fitness and bodybuilding and things like that. And I always wanted to have my own gym, like a Gold's Gym, like a Muscle Beach kind of thing. That's the kind of gym I always wanted to have. After the 90s, that kind of went down a drain. The fitness industry changed. Bodybuilding wasn't a thing anymore. But I was one of the first jobs I got when I got out of the Army. I started being a manager in the Gold's Gym in Fayetteville, right outside Fort Bragg. That was the first job I took outside. Well, when I got out, I did some private security contractor stuff and things like that. All the stuff that the Bragg people do when they get out. But I was really into fitness and I was really into bodybuilding in the 80s and 90s. So I was wanted to do that. And I always wanted to have a gym. So I started managing a Gold's Gym in Fayetteville. And after not too long, an opportunity came up. They needed I didn't work for the gym. I worked for a fitness management company called ACS, American Club System. And they ran those kind of corporate gyms. So usually like some celebrity sports star owned them or something like that. And then you just paid somebody to run it. So that company had an opportunity, had a gym in Boulder, Colorado, a world gym, actually, that was owned by some NBA guy. I don't even know who it is. He had a world gym in Boulder, Colorado, that was just doing terribly. Like, it was just losing money hand over fist. And he wanted to sell it, and he wanted to hire the company to send some guys over there, turn it around so they could sell it. And nobody wanted the job. It was terrible, right? So, and I was very low level in the company at the time. I was just like a sales manager guy. So me and two other guys volunteered to do it for the promise of, when if we pulled this off, they would give us our own gym. We'd be GMs.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So that's somewhere in the country. So I never intended to stay there. It was like I just went there to get this opportunity, and I showed up. I met these two other guys that were coming from other gyms in the States somewhere. Excuse me. And we met that day at the airport. Went in. I think it was like a year only. We turned the gym around, and they sold it. And they sold it to some local guys who turned it into a local gym that was called Mountain's Edge Fitness or something like that. And I wound up hanging out there for a while. But what made me actually be stranded in Boulder, because that's basically what happened. I got stranded there. It's a
good place. It's not a bad place to get stranded, all things considered.
Yeah. It was when after the deal was done, the new people came in and bought the place, and a new gym took over, and they brought in their own staff. So like there was no place for me. And the company that made us the deal, they reneged on it. Like, so they were like, we're not going to give you a gym. So they're like, you can go work as a manager in another gym somewhere. And the other two guys took it. Well, one guy, he did get a GM because he was basically the GM of this place, and me and the other dude were assistant GMs. And the guy that GM'd this whole operation, he got a gym. And then me and the other guy that were assistants, they just shafted us. The other guy wound up taking their deal and going to another place. And I told him to friggin' fuck off, man. I'm out of here. So, and then to nothing, but I didn't have any job or anything like that. But by then I was already training jiu-jitsu. I'd already met Amal by that point, which is another reason why I didn't leave.
So help me understand that. So the timeline wise, when you met Amal, had you already been training and fighting at that time? Like, had you been doing other martial arts, or was jiu-jitsu the very first thing that you started, like martial arts wise?
Well, you got to understand, at that point, I'm like 30 years old already, because I'm out of the Army already. I'm, wrapping up like my bodybuilding thing. And so I've been already training martial arts for like 15 years. I started training martial arts when I was like a teenager. Like that's one of the things that I was always into. Martial arts and fitness and music were my three things. And like, I don't know why. Like I just really, really took to all three of those. I don't know if it's the creativity part of it, or I think if you look at the time period that I was in, I think it's kind of like the rogue, rebellious kind of thing too, because growing up in New York City in the 70s and 80s, I mean, like, man, especially the 80s, the golden age of metal, man. In the 80s, New York City, it's the center of the universe at that time. So, and it was the thing, like it was, like it was definitely the rogue life, wanting to be a rock star in the 80s. And martial arts was the same thing. It was this mysterious, and this is pre-internet, this is pre-internet. That's the problem with the internet today. There's no mystery with anything. You know what I mean? It was like rock in the 70s and 80s was like, man, a rock star. It was this mysterious thing that like you only dream about, And then same thing with martial arts. It had this mystique. And then in the 80s, when like all the in the 70s, you had Bruce Lee and stuff like that, and it was very mysterious. There was a lot of mystique. And then in the 80s, it was like all the ninja shit. And it's like, oh, ninjas, man. Like overseas, like there's things like the Shaolin Temple and ninjas and things like that. And it's like, man, it's so mysterious. And like, I just wanted to know all the secrets of the universe and everything like that. I guess I just felt like I was attracted to those kind of things. I didn't want to have a job or work in a freaking department store or something. It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, and especially hanging out at some of like the New York hardcore shows that you would go to, you also don't want to get your ass kicked, because those are like some pretty rough rooms back in the 80s, man.
Yeah. And it was just a tough physical culture. I mean, even I can't say that like I was always involved in martial arts, even as a kid, but like I was never really picked on. I wasn't like a popular kid or anything like that, but I wasn't picked on really either. I wasn't bullied or anything more than the average person, and I had a pretty good group of friends later, especially once I got into high school. I had a pretty good crew of like just a bunch of musicians, metalheads, like we had a really tight crew, really supportive of each other. Surprisingly, back in that day, not a lot of druggies in the group. They were pretty anti-drugs. I've gotten to like a little bit of an anti-drug group. Not that everybody was clean, but it was a crazy scene back then.
Yeah.
But I stayed really healthy.
So what was the first thing that you got exposed to? Was it like boxing or like what was like the first thing you really started training?
I don't know if I was in middle school or what, or maybe I was like a freshman in high school. What is that, like 13, 14-ish,
Yeah,
something like
probably
that?
14.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's about when I started. And I was really into martial arts back then, but like I would get all the magazines and the books. And we had this really huge martial arts store uh, just a couple blocks down, which was really weird. It was this huge place that had all this equipment and all the books and magazines, and like it was nuts. So like I would walk by there all the time and look in, and you'd always go in and they have all like the swords and the weapons and the throwing stars and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
knives behind the counter, like one of those places.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I grew up like hanging out in that place, and I was like, man, I gotta really get into all this stuff. So I would buy stuff and buy magazine stuff even before I knew what I was doing. And then I think it was like around 13 or so that a friend of mine from school revealed to me one day, and of course he's only like 15, but revealed to me one day that he was a black belt in Ishinryu karate, and his dad ran a school out of their house, out of their basement. Their basement was set up like a dojo, and they had a separate exit to the house
Okay.
built, so you can go in, and that's how I started training. And he's like, "Hey, you should come in." I was like, "Heck yeah!" And then I started training. Oh, what's up, baby?
Now I feel like we cut to the picture of George with the long hair and his karate.
Yeah, I know. I know. I need to track that down. I know. I should have been prepared for that because there was a little stretch there where people were like, I don't know if somebody like found an old box of Polaroids or something, but there was like a bunch of pictures of George from the 70s and 80s that were just making its way on the Facebook page.
Yeah, that's my buddy.
Is there like Metalhead? Then there's also the one where you look like you're in Cobra Kai from Karate Kid. Like you look like the bad guy in an 80s martial arts movie. The hair.
Well, everybody had long hair back then. Which makes me
that now. Yeah.
Yeah, I had really long hair. Yeah, but it's funny. I had a. What are you gonna pull it up?
Oh, of course I have. I have the technology, man. I'm working on it. I'm
Yeah,
not as fast as Jamie on JRE, man, but I'm pretty quick.
We'll get it in there.
It's on my personal Facebook. Why am I helping you? It's on my
We'll get it. Man, you were in a band too. Tell us about your band. How'd you get into a band?
Man, my mom was really into music. So I grew up with really great music in the 70s. Like all the best stuff, man. And my mom played guitar a little bit. My grandfather played guitar too. So my mom would just play guitar in the house a lot. And she started me off. And then she turned me on to her record collection one day. I think I must have been like 10 years old. And she showed me the Kiss Destroyer album. You know what I'm talking about, Rob?
Yep.
Kiss Destroyer album. I saw that album and I was like, this is what I want to be. I was like, that's it, man. I saw that and I was like, what the hell is this? She told me, I heard Detroit Rock City. And I was like, man, this is it. This is it for life. She ruined me right there. And at that point, she guaranteed I was never going to have a job.
She's like, nope, that's it. Done.
Turf. Yep.
Talking about Mystique, like Kiss had to be the first time where you were blown away, right? Where, I mean, they're bringing out pyrotechnics. I mean, they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. They had the costumes. Was anybody doing that before them?
A little bit. I mean, New York Dolls, and they kind of stole New York Dolls show, but a little bit. But yeah, I mean, like, but that's the thing, man. It's like the mystique of a subculture that, and the allure of it is nobody else likes it. Like it's like all the adults and the grown-ups are like, oh, it's Satan, you're gonna go to hell. Like
immediately. Yeah.
And looking back, like looking now that my birthday's next week, I'm gonna be 52. Now that I'm back at all the things that I've done, it's like there's always been that rebellious mystique to them all. Like because when I got involved with jiu-jitsu, or martial arts was very mystique oriented. When I got involved in jiu-jitsu, during like just when the dark period was starting. I mean, like it was like human cockfighting. It was like nobody did that shit. It was like everybody was this avidly against, this thing that, we were doing, and nobody knew what it was. And, guys are still looking for that picture, man. Just
man, I got two of them. I sent them to Rob.
I got them. I'm getting everything queued up.
So how did you get into jiu-jitsu? So you're down in Boulder. You said you already met Amal. I mean, did you stop by one of their shows and you paid $1 to fight them, or what? What happened? Do you know? Were you guys doing that?
roll with the fighter for $1. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
that was our Boulder Creek Festival thing, and I don't suggest that as a business model to anybody.
Not now, certainly.
No, that's a different world, for sure. It didn't work then either, by the way. When I was
the first time I've seen something like that is my buddy's dad is a world champion arm wrestler who was in the movie Over the Top. He was an extra in Over the Top.
He was in that movie?
Yeah, he was in that movie.
That's awesome.
So they used to do this thing where you could arm wrestle him for $1 at the Fargo Force hockey games. And this dude is enormous. He was in the WCW. His name's Rich Lupkis. He was in WCW in the 90s. He's just an absolute tank. And you look at this guy, you're like, what planet are you from, dude? You're huge. He's like 375 pounds. He's like 6'4", 6'5", just enormous dude. And he would people would just pay him if you beat him in arm wrestling, you got $1,000. And you it was $1 to every time you tried to do it. And nobody, of course, would ever beat this guy.
Yeah. Crazy.
Do him. I got the picture up. There it is.
Which one did you pick?
Look at that hair.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I'm
a brown belt there.
Look at that.
This is actually, you know what? This is I know what this picture's from. This is from it was the Garden State Games Full Contact Karate Championship.
Yes. This sounds like out of the Karate Kid. Yeah.
Exactly.
Look at that black gi.
Yeah.
That's good.
I remember that because back then nobody wore black gis and we used to take a lot of flack for that.
That's awesome.
That was it's against tradition or what?
Yeah, I guess. It's funny, that was a really cool tournament actually because it was pretty rough and it wasn't style based. It was just all striking arts could enter.
Oh, dang.
It wasn't 100.
Yeah.
It wasn't 100% full contact
right.
though. So it was like a half. It was like a full contact, but they scored points too.
Okay,
So it would stop it after points, but you were going full on.
Got it. And so you see other grappling or other striking arts and stuff, other people would join outside of karate.
Right. So there was all different styles there. It wasn't just that school that I was in. That was Oseki's Ishinryu actually. That was Ishinryu Okinawan style. That wasn't a real competition oriented school. That was more like a fighting place. But we would do tournaments every once in a while.
Got it.
So tell us how you met them all.
I just walked in the gym one day. I knew about a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I knew I wanted to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu long before that. There was just no place to go.
Right.
I watched the original UFC 1 in '93. So I knew about Jiu-Jitsus and I knew about the Gracies. I was actually living in Europe at the time in '93. So I didn't move back to the United States until '95. And then I moved to Boulder in '98. So from '93 to '98, it was just I knew about it, but there was just no information. Occasionally I'd run into somebody that knows a little something in the Army or something, but it was it wasn't a really great learning time unless you happened to be in Hawaii or in California or something.
Right.
But when I finally wound up in Boulder, the place that I first moved, the apartment that I was sharing with those other guys that were running the gym with me was just happened to be right across the street from where Amal opened up.
Wow.
Because he opened up in this little strip mall that ran parallel to a supermarket. It was a King Supers, I think it was called. It's the equivalent, their version of Hornbachers or whatever.
Yep.
And so how they have the huge mall or the huge supermarket, and then there's maybe a strip mall in the parking lot too, and that kind of stuff. And he was in one of those little side strip malls, and I was going in to every day because I went in to get my chicken and broccoli, and I came out and I just looked and it said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was like, son of a bitch, look at that. So me and the guy, one of my friends from the gym who's really into it too, we just went in there one day. Actually, this is actually a funny story. I went in my first day. I went in with what was eventually going to be. He was one of my bodybuilding buddies, Sean, and one of my powerlifting trainer coaches, Dave Schiff, who used to work for Schwinn. And Dave was gigantic. He was 6'5", just humongous, neck tats, totally sleeved out. like I think he had a mohawk at the time even, and me and Sean were just super. I mean, I was like 240, super yoked, like 235 ish, just freaking, and we just walk in there, and Jay Jack is teaching.
Oh, of course, yeah.
We walk in there, and it's like he's teaching. There's like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 guys in there, and we just sit down. Don't ask any questions, not interested in any information. I just sit down and want to watch because I already kind of know I want to do this. This is something I already know about. Like, and back then nobody knew anything about jiu-jitsu. So anybody who walked in the gym, especially looking like us, they just want to fight. So, so I remember like we walked in and sat down. I was like super excited, and Jay looks at us, like the class, everybody just stops and everybody just turns around and looks, and Jay's like, he just gets up, walks over, like, it's like, okay, let's go, and walks over and he's like, so how you guys doing? We're like, good. He's like, you guys got any questions, or do you, I'm like no. We just don't say anything. And he's like, can I help you? And he's like, oh, we just want to check it out. And he's like, okay, and I don't remember when I actually rolled with Elliot. I don't know if it was that time, or I think I came back later by myself, because I don't think Amal was there that time. I remember I came back and met with Amal in his office, and I think maybe Elliot was there. I think maybe they scheduled me to come back and do like an intro or something like that. And then when I came back, it was Elliot, and like he's like, okay, come on out here. You can do whatever you want. Let's go. That's it. That was the intro. Like, and then we basically went at him, and like he rolled me up for like 10 minutes, and man, it was the freaking most awesome thing. Like he didn't beat the shit out of me or anything, but like he rolled me up pretty good, because he didn't know what to expect. I was this super yoke guy, and he was young back then. I mean, like Elliot was only like 17 or 8 then. Yeah, not even 18. I think I remember when he turned 18.
Like blue belt, purple belt at the time, or
he was a white belt. Like there was no colored belts yet.
Oh, whoa!
I was there for the first. It was this guy Forrest Reynolds. He was the first guy to get a blue belt from Amal, and super good guy, man. Like an Olympic powerlifter kind of dude. Super stumpy. Like it's funny because his best move was triangle, and he was exactly the guy that you'd never think would be good at triangles. Him and his buddy, Dave, another guy that got his blue belt right away. He was like a world record holder, powerlifter or something like that. He was only like 130 pounds or some shit. One of those kind of guys. Yeah. Pit bull. But yeah, I went out there, and they were like, I was like, man, this is awesome. Sign me up. And I was like, immediately, this is what I'm doing. This is it. Like, I immediately didn't want to have a bodybuilding gym anymore. I wanted to train jiu-jitsu all the time. That was it.
So how much were you training when you first started? Like,
I think we were doing like 2 days, basically 6 days a week, and we would, because nobody had jobs, so like nobody worked. It was all like, it was just like, I don't want to say dregs of society because I don't want them to get all mad, but, it was everybody. Like the only people I trained back then was like people that wanted to fight. So it was, or like super serious, like people that were just nuts. And, so most of the people didn't have jobs. So we would do a day session, and then all the geese would be laying out on the cars in the parking lot all day, drying, and then we'd come back in the evening and we'd train again at night. And that was it. I did that for a couple of years, for sure. And yeah, and like again too, I didn't have a job. I just got a job in the bar at night to just, all I wanted to do was train jiu-jitsu and work out. So I needed to create a lifestyle that supported that. So I cut myself off from everything. I got one of my bodybuilding buddies. Actually, before I even got him as a roommate, I moved into somebody's garage, and I lived in a 1-car garage stall for, geez, like 2 years, two and a half years. And it was the Delta sorority house. I moved into their garage because when I was working at the gym, the way the Tri-Delts work is they have the sorority houses on campus, but then like the low budget, like the freshman girls don't get to live in the nice place. They have these rundown houses around town where they put up like the freshmen and sophomores, I guess.
Okay.
And like this is the shitty house. It's all dilapidated, falling apart. And so I lived in the garage, and I knew the girl. They call them the house mother, the girl that was running that one house. She was a friend of mine from the gym, And she's like, yeah, we kind of want somebody in the house. We're looking for a roommate. We want a guy. We have this little studio. It turned out to be their garage.
Yeah.
They want us. They're looking for a guy to move in there with, because they don't feel comfortable in there, just the girls. And I was like, well, sounds good. I'll take it. So I went over there. It was awesome. Everything just in the garage, and the garage door into the house led into the kitchen. So I had the access to the kitchen, and for some reason the washer and dryer were in the kitchen, so I had that. And then there was a bathroom on the downstairs. They let me come in to use the bathroom and stuff. And then eventually I worked out a deal, and it was super cheap. Obviously, it was practically nothing. And then I wound up working out a deal where I got to stay there for free completely, because I worked something out with the landlord that I would fix anything that broke, which was everything all the time. The place was a hole.
Okay, so you just turned into a handyman, basically.
Yeah, basically. And so then I got to live basically free. So I worked in the bar a couple of nights a week with all the jiu-jitsu. All the guys at the jiu-jitsu worked in the club down at Pearl Street, and we all worked in the same bar, the Foundry. So there was like a whole bunch of us there. Like all the main guys worked there at one point. Me, Jay, Elliot, Marcos, Finney. Man, there was a whole bunch of us that worked there. It was awesome. We just worked there at night and trained all day. That was it. Good times.
So I think probably what people don't realize now is that things were different when you started, right? You kind of alluded to some of that, whereas, it's just people who are fighting. But, I think even something where like the gis now, where you can just go buy a gi now. You can go online. I mean, I think about even when I started 10 years ago, you couldn't really just go online and get a gi. All the gis that you started with.
It wasn't really online back then.
Yeah, right.
When did the real internet start? I mean, you could say like around 95-ish, but like when did real e-commerce start? It wasn't probably until the 2000s.
Yeah, I would say probably because I graduated in 2002 from high school. So it's probably around then, I would say. Because I didn't get a cell phone, until I was a sophomore in college. And I mean, we used computers, but it really wasn't that big of a thing.
I remember I'm the one who set up Amal's first website. And it must have been around 2001 or 2 or something like that, because I was in school. I was in college for information security, actually, and because my degree's in network administration and IT security.
Yeah,
you're not. I'm actually smart. I know shit. Not just some freaking Jersey dude. I'm not the Jersey Shore.
So tell us about those first days on the mat. Like, how did you get a gi? What were your classes like? Well, I mean, did you have the same instructor? Was it like we have it now, where there's leveled classes? Was it all the same class?
No, it was basically just there was 2 classes. There was the beginner class and then the advanced class, but it wasn't really beginner and advanced. It was just like there was a class that you can come to, and there wasn't stripes. We didn't use stripes on belts back then either. So like, we had a silver. If you look on the wall, my white belt at the gym, it's got one silver duct tape stripe on it. And the silver duct tape stripe means you could train with the good guys.
Oh.
And that was it. So like you could do the class, and then get your silver duct tape stripe, and you can train hard. Basically, that was it.
And
Right.
how so back in the day, how long would it take you to like? Was it like totally subjective of like, okay, once you're in, or was it like, no, we're not giving that out to anybody in the first 6 months? Like, what was it like back then?
I don't really remember. I know I had a little bit of a benefit too, because when I started at the end of the year. So I came in around like Thanksgiving time. So they were just getting ready to wrap up for the holidays. A lot of people were leaving. A lot of people, like, training was slowing down. Like, and you got to remember, there was only like 20 or 30 people in the school. It wasn't like this massive. So like everybody trained together all the time. It was one group, And I think everything was wrapping up, and I think maybe Amal was maybe going back to Brazil or something. Like, they were closing up for the holidays basically. But Jay, I think he lived in the gym. I think he lived in the closet in the gym. This is going to be a crazy podcast, man. He was living in the closet because I think at the time we built a law firm in there, and he just ran the place for them all because he was there. And so there was nobody around. So when I joined, and I was there by myself, and I just lost my job, so I didn't have anything to do, and I didn't have any family there, I didn't know anybody. So like I just hung out with Jay during that whole 3-month period, and he basically gave me privates for like the first 3 months I was there, and really set me up, and it really got me set up on the right track, you know. And then when everybody came back, I was already kind of had an idea what was happening, kind of, you know what I mean? And was kind of in at that point with him. And if you're in with him, you're good, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, it was I was lucky. I was lucky for sure.
Was there anything else that was different? And I know it's like your classes, like what were you doing as far as techniques?
Well, we didn't have a structured curriculum yet. Well, that's actually an interesting story. Like, I don't want to get into that. Like, what we got to talk about that. But, you know, back then it was like, you know, what do you want to learn? Here's a move. Now we're training. You know, and we train hard. What you were talking about the other day about like Nicky Rod, how like he just trains hard and then they just work. What are you messing up on? Let's just fix it and then just train hard. Yeah. It was much similar to that.
Right.
You know, it was much more similar to that. Like we would go over some stuff, train hard, works or it doesn't.
Right.
and you know, maybe go over to have some questions, train hard, you know, and yeah.
And so what was the technique situation like? Because I think what people take for granted now is that, you know, so I can go to class, I can learn stuff from one of the coaches or one of the professors, and then I can supplement that with YouTube at home. But I think what they forget is that there was jiu-jitsu when there wasn't YouTube, right? So
yeah,
how were you guys getting new techniques? Was Amal going to see Henzo in New York on a regular basis? Was people coming through?
The thing is, like, people were super secretive about the techniques back then. Like, because like it wasn't like a free for all on you. Now everybody shares everything because you have to, you know, because everybody, if they don't learn from you, they're gonna learn from somebody else. But Amal was a purple belt when I joined, actually. So he was still going back and forth to Brazil on a regular basis. I think he was going to Henzo's in New York like at least once a month or so. Like he was doing like one long weekend a month and then go to Brazil a couple times a year. And yeah, and like the thing about that is this is like what I call like before the jiu-jitsu big bang, I like to call it. Like it was still the singularity, you know, like Rio was still the singularity. Everybody was still there. So that's one of the reasons why Amal knows everybody, man. That guy is a freaking social butterfly like you wouldn't believe. He literally knows everybody everywhere. Like you wouldn't believe it. But the thing is, he knew everybody back before they exploded out. It would be almost impossible to develop a social network today like Amal has, you know, with everybody so spread out. You'd literally be on the road 365 to try and do something like that. But everybody was, jiu-jitsu was much more condensed. So, and less evolved for sure, you know, because remember, like back then, jiu-jitsu was like jiu-jitsu, competition, fighting, Vale Tudo, because there wasn't MMA, like was barely a thing. Like it was all the same thing. Like I walk into a class, like a class could be gi, no gi. We could be shooting takedowns on a guy with boxing gloves. That was just a regular week, you know, all that stuff, you know. So, you know, slap fighting without the gi, you know, with the gi, you know. So how I competed in jiu-jitsu was the same way I would fight in the street. It's the same way that we fought in the ring before, you know, before like there was a huge evolution of each individual sport. So everything was the same to me. Like MMA was jiu-jitsu, you know, and fighting was jiu-jitsu. It was just all just jiu-jitsu.
You did some of that old school tough man stuff too, didn't you? Was that while you were training jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, but that was boxing.
Right.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. That was when I first started. Like as soon as I started training jiu-jitsu, I stopped doing all that other shit.
Right.
You know, the kickboxing and the boxing and stuff like that, and the tough man. Like I just wanted to do jiu-jitsu after that.
And you mentioned that when you guys started training, Amal was a purple belt. I mean, how rare was that at the time that somebody had a purple belt anywhere?
We were,
let alone America. Yeah.
We were like gods when we were walking around. I mean, like the tournament situation, like we would come rolling in and it was like, man, it was awesome. Unless you were, like I said, unless you were like in Hawaii or California or you happened to be somewhere. I think maybe Florida had some good stuff going on at the time, but like that was it, you know. And the tournament scene was the Wild West. You know, there wasn't jiu-jitsu tournaments. you just had to roll into like some kind of martial arts expo or something like that, and they would have a mat thrown in the back room somewhere where nobody would see because nobody cared, and they would be like sign up for a grappling competition, and the rules were, it was just crazy. Like it could be anything. Like there was, nobody knew how to keep score, nobody knew what things were. They didn't, like, you had to start from your knees, you had to start standing. It was just crazy. And like people didn't have any kind of, a lot of people didn't have jujitsu training, so it was just grappling of whatever. So it was
Wild West, man.
this was like white and blue belt. I mean, like there, it got better, as it got more popular. But the early times, it was kind of fun. And again, too, it had that mystique and that rebellious mystique because you'd come rolling in as a grappler. We'd come into like the CK was the Colorado Karate Association, was a huge association of martial arts schools, and there was like dozens of karate schools, and they each one would take a month of the year and run an event. So there was a competition every month, and then the big one was the slam tournament, which had, geez, man, it seemed like there was 1,000 people there. It had like 10 mats going. But there would always be like in the back corner, the grapplers, and you'd come rolling in and like, that everybody's looking at you funny, and you like it, man. You like it, So, and then people would enter and these crazy, we'd have these crazy rolls.
Man, that reminds me, I was watching a podcast recently. One of these, what's the guy's name? Rob, do you know him? He's trying to look him up here. He's one of these he's taken it upon himself to be a jiu-jitsu historian. He does a lot of stuff with flow grappling. But he did the match from the Arnold, and this is a long time ago, but I think it was Pan to Pan and Jeff Munson. And it was the one, Professor, you were telling me about this, where there was a rule where you couldn't do a can opener. And so, yeah. So
that was like the Grappler's Quest and like Naga. I wasn't a big Naga guy. We were big Grappler's Quest guys. We'd go down to Las Vegas and do Grappler's Quest a lot. And that was the early Grappler's Quest days was really, that was like that would be like the Grapplers version of the UFC of the day. I mean, it was like all the famous people like were there. Like I even remember seeing like a lot of Brazilian guys were there, like Matt and Mark Hughes, Jeff Monson. I mean, like, man, that whole scene, that whole era, all the old school guys. What's his name? West Side Strangler guy. Chris Brennan. Yep. Even Frank Beer. What's his name? Big Country. Like all those guys. It was cool seeing all those dudes there. But I almost got into a fight with Matt Hughes' brother Mark in the stands because he was talking shit to Sarah one time. Like, but this was like
I don't think you could just brush over that story. We gotta hear more about that story.
That's it. Nothing ever became of it. Like everybody just kind of walked away. But not talking. She was like hitting on her. That's There's actually Sarah got into you see the 1001 submission DVDs that they used to come out with and stuff like that.
Yeah, back in the day. Right.
Sarah was in the very first one. Her match with Ghazi Parman when Ghazi was a purple belt and Sarah was still a white belt, I think, or blue belt. That's how little there was no women back then.
Right.
So yeah, like Sarah hates that. She's gonna be mad that I brought it up.
Now we're gonna go find it.
That's
like, wow,
it's on 1001 submissions, the first one, because I think they came out with a second, which is easy, but not easy when you're getting armbar triangles, getting flying through the air. I think she popped her arm too.
Okay.
But yes, that would back to like your question. There was Monson had that neck crank thing, man, and they made some kind of crazy rule where like, and this is a progression. This was later already because it progressed. They like you could do anything because back in those early ones, man, you could do anything, crank and necks and all kinds of shit. And then they took the neck crank away, and then the people that were crankers like Monson, they complained,
right,
that they needed it, and then they said they complained that they needed to pass the guard, and so they said, okay, you can crank the neck to open the guard, but you can't finish. Like, how are you gonna moderate that, right?
Right.
So like, and I don't remember. It was, I think it was Petipano. I think it was Petipano. So. It was Petipano. I think it was Petipano. He was facing Monson, and Monson neck cranked him to open his guard. And as soon as he did it, Petipano just let him go, jumped up, put his hands in the air, and started running around like he won. And like because they told him to DQ him or something like that because he tapped to the crank. and then got up. Oh no, he tapped and then got up and put his hands up. Yeah, that was a crazy. That was crazy.
But the point that I was
Yeah,
going
those
off
old
of,
grapplers quests, they always ended in a brawl.
yeah, right. And that's you guys got to go watch the video of this. Is where that would never happen in a tournament today. But it was the two teams, right? And so there was the Brazilians for Petipano, and then whoever, and I think there was a Brazilian with Monson, but they all swarmed the mat, and it ended up turning into a fist fight. It was crazy. It was like the Wild West. But I suppose that was
Not
jiu-jitsu
uncommon.
back in the not uncommon. That's awesome.
Did
so
that ever used to happen, like in training sessions? Like, did stuff ever get like? Because you and I have talked about this, George, like how training sessions were different back in the day. But did you ever see like did it ever turn into scraps?
No, no way. No. Everybody was really close and took good care of each other. At least at our gym. I don't know what it was like anywhere else, but no, like we were definitely a team and we took good care of each other and like we were tight for sure. Nobody was going to hurt anybody on purpose. People got hurt, but like not any more than I think they do now.
Just from training, but it wasn't like. But if you had like, did you just have like randos that would just come in and like, it's like, oh, hey, I want to come in here, like just people
Gracie
coming off the
challenge
street.
match.
Gracie
Let's
challenge
go.
stuff, and it's like,
Yeah,
all right,
that was the tail end of that, like, but
Okay.
like when I was like a white belt and maybe even blue belt still, like there was still the occasional guy to come in and, want to test their fucking kung fu or something. And Jay, there's a couple of good Jay stories from back then, but yeah, like guys would come in and like it's the Tai Chi guys, man. They're the worst, man. Jesus Christ, the kung fu guys. I don't know if it's just Boulder had a big population of them or what. But like it seemed like every other week, like some Tai Chi guy was coming in saying that like they'll just tear your ear off if you try and guillotine them or something. It was crazy. Like rip your ear off. I mean, really, of all things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, as far as instructors, was it just Amal, or did you have people coming through? I know that we've had Seneca up to our gym a few times. Like, how were you introduced to Seneca?
Well, Seneca was one of Amal's primary instructors.
And so did he come up to Colorado quite often, or how did that work?
Yeah, he did. Amal used to bring him up. Amal, I think, was pretty influential in getting him set up in the States, actually, like getting his own thing going here. But yeah, he used to come up a lot. And like I said, there wasn't a lot happening in America. So when guys would come through, they'd always have to come through the Denver before they split off to wherever they were going. And Amal knew everyone. So everybody always stopped by and hung out at Boulder for a little while, a few days or a week or so, and we've had, man, it seems like we had all like a lot of the big name guys back in the day. And even guys that Amal knew that were nobodies back then. I remember Amal he was like, man, there's this brown belt. He's going to come up and stay with us for a while. He's this brown belt. He's tearing it up. He's just crushing it. He won the brown belt world championships like twice, and he's gonna win this year too. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, why is he still a brown belt? But like he's like where he's this guy. He's gonna, when you come up, make sure you train with him while he's coming. He came up, man, and like he was super yoked, dude, and like it was just killer. Just rolled us up for like a few days, and yeah, it was home a little hell. Yeah, I think I met Braulio the same way. Braulio, I think, was a brown belt when he came in. I think. I'm not sure, but Braulio used to come up a lot. Gordo was there a few times, I think. We had Hoyler up. Even Eddie Bravo. We had Eddie Bravo up there one time. Man, I can't think. Man,
is that what started the decline, the dislike of Eddie Bravo? Right there, he came to your gym and he just.
No, because he beat Hoyler in the ADCC.
That's where the tension started.
For him, you mean with me personally?
I don't think it's a secret that you don't like Eddie Bravo or the 10th Planet System.
No, I don't dislike him. I don't dislike him. I'm just not a fan of the system because.
Sure, okay.
Because I don't think it's true jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Because it requires a specific physical attribute that not everybody has.
That's super flexibility.
So by definition, it's not jiu-jitsu.
Right.
But still, I mean, grappling. I mean, like whatever, submission grappling, you can call it whatever you want.
So, what advice would you give to your white belt self today? If you were starting again as a 30-year-old.
Man, I don't know. All my advice now would be irrelevant for then. you know, for that time
Well,
period. But
what
I
would
would,
it be for now?
I would, if I could go back and do everything over, I would do everything the exact same, except I would, I would have fought MMA. My original plan was I wanted to fight MMA like everybody else, you know. But back in those days, only the very best guy in the school fought because you were still fighting for honor and shit back then. It wasn't money or anything. As a matter of fact, you were going to lose a shitload of money if you were. I mean, even today you lose money fighting MMA, but so like only the best guys fought. It's because there was no way. Like you had to like jump through hoops to try and find a fight, and then it would be in like a barn in like Wyoming somewhere, you know, or some shit. Which was actually the first fight that Jay actually did was in a barn in like Wyoming or some shit. You know, he had to fly out there, and you know, so like there wasn't access to getting fights, you know, and so there was only Jay and the best guys. So like if you wanted to fight, you had to be like beating them and Elliot and shit like that. So I originally wanted to fight, but then like I just kind of got on the back burner and just got really into jiu-jitsu and just training with them. Like I trained with them and helped prep guys for fights. I just never fought myself. So, but and like I would have done it because like I would like to just say I did it. Um, I don't want a career or anything. I just would like to have done it just to do it, just a bucket list thing. And the second thing I would do is take physical better care of myself. You know, like just not
the recovery stuff and kind of the
just yeah. I was I mean I was super fit. I like worked out a lot and strong and everything like that. But I'm talking about not allow myself to not put myself in positions where I took all these heinous injuries. I mean, I've had a lot of injuries. I've had knee surgery on both my knees. I've had spinal fusion surgery, broke my arm, you know, like tore my shoulder up, you know, traumatic hand injury. I mean, like there's all kinds of stuff. I would like to have not gone through that, and I'm paying for it.
And these are
Like,
all jujitsu.
The
Are
ones
these?
the ones I mentioned are well, I broke my arm. The break in my arm was here. That wasn't jiu-jitsu oriented, but everything else was. Like I've torn my LCL in both knees. You know, popped my feet. You know, hyperextended shit. You know, like it's like everything that I'm paying. Like I'm achy and stiff, and like I could be more functional human being today if I took better care of myself back then. Especially, you know, getting. I mean, I started this at 30 years old.
Right.
You know, so you know, and I wanted to live it. You know, I wanted to live it like of the times, you know. So, you know, I did everything that the 20-year-olds were doing and the way the 20-year-olds were doing it, you know. And didn't seem like it was any different at the time, but you know, what are you gonna do? So that would be my advice. I would just say take better care of myself. You know, I would still do everything. I'm not gonna kid myself and say that I wouldn't do it. Because I would definitely would for sure.
Still worth
Like,
it.
like knowing everything I know now, if I had a chance to go back and do it over again and still take the injuries, I would.
Right.
You know, but you know, I would like to figure out a way to try and do it a little safer, like from a health perspective. That would really be my only advice to myself back then.
When did you get your blue belt?
I don't know the dates of my promotions. I know I do remember that I got it in 15 or 16 months, which was the fastest blue belt Amal ever gave out at the time. Because before then, 2 years minimum. 2 years, 24 months was the standard for a blue belt. You know, because back then blue belt was like superhero. They kicked Mike Tyson's ass when you were blue belt back in 2002. You know, so like it was quite a feat. So yeah, and I got it. So let's say 2001-ish, something like that, maybe.
Okay.
You know, middle halfway through 2001. Yeah.
And you said you were competing. Were you competing the whole time, or?
I did my first competition 2 weeks.
2 weeks after you started.
2 weeks from walking in the door.
Yeah, and I won my division. And just to tell you what I did, I won my 2 weeks into jiu-jitsu. I won my I don't know if maybe I only fought one guy. I don't remember. But I remember I won the last match, the final, because that's the only one I remember. I won the final with a rolling omoplata triangle combo.
Wow.
And I remember because everybody stopped and asked me, even the coach of the guy and everybody, they pulled me on the side afterwards. They're like, "You got to show us what you did there, man. That was fucking crazy." And I was like, yeah,
Did you know?
because
Did you know what it was?
yeah,
Or just
yeah.
like did it just happen?
Well, my very first class was omoplata.
Oh shoot. Okay.
Dope.
All I knew how to
Dope.
all I knew how to do was omoplata and clock choke. All I knew how to do. Yeah, and that's right, because I clock choked the first guy. That's what it was. Like, I think he shot at a single. I sprawled and clock choked him. That was it. It was over. And I was like, man, this is like having a fucking superpower. And and then the guy shot a single, put me down onto my knee, and I just rolled omoplata, like Seneca. I think maybe Seneca shot rolling omoplata.
Single like defense where you just roll through.
And the guy pulled up and just spun me right into the triangle. Boop. And I nailed that shit. And you want to talk about feeling like a rock star. That was better than any stage experience I had. And I had some stage experience. Yeah, that was my first tournament. 2 weeks, rolling omoplata.
Did you do pans or anything? Did you do pans or anything or worlds leading around that time?
No, I didn't start doing big tournaments until well, hell, I don't even know if those tournaments were in the United States yet. I don't know when they started coming to America. I remember when it was in Puerto Rico, so like it was definitely something around that time.
Right.
No, but I didn't start doing bigger events until I was like a purple belt, because I didn't have any money, remember?
Right.
Still living in a garage. So
and you kind of have go ahead.
No, let's go.
You kind of have a crazy purple belt story, don't you? So you were supposed to go compete at a big tournament, and you'd already signed up and everything like that. And then was this purple or brown? And then right before you went, you got promoted?
I don't know.
I thought you were telling me that, like you were all signed up for Worlds and you were all ready to go and you had your bracket and everything figured out. And then like a week before, Amal's like, hey, new purple belt.
Oh, maybe it was brown.
Might have been brown.
Maybe it was brown. Yeah, because I was on the tail end of that superstar brown generation with like, because I remember when I did the Worlds at brown belt in the adult division, there was like there was like 100 people in my division.
You told me about that bracket, and you're like, oh yeah, when I did this tournament, there was like 16 guys. I'm like, oh my god, it's like you were in the division with all those guys. I'm like, yeah, it was adult division.
There was 16. It was something like 15 or 16 man brackets that they had to fight through, and then they made another 16-man brackets for the finals. It took like all day. It was ridiculous.
Tom DeBlas was in your division. Like there was a bunch of dudes that were like
Cron Gracie, Octavio Souza, Bill the Grill was in there, because I remember the final was Octavio and Bill the Grill. Yeah, Tom. There was a lot of people that turned out to be famous. A lot of guys that were in the UFC in that division. I mean, it was crazy. That was a pretty crazy generation, because that was the generation of guys who came up, the tough guys. That was like the tough guys were training jiu-jitsu back then. But it was new enough that they were starting to get good at jiu-jitsu, like technical jiu-jitsu, like jiu-jitsu more like it is today, you know. And man, well, you know, you see those guys. I mean, they're tough and freaking brilliant.
Right.
You know, that was a brutal like generation to be a part of. I mean, that's clearly like why I didn't win shit. You know, and then that was when it was starting to become a transition to like you had to be a pro athlete, you know, by then. Because like when I first started training jiu-jitsu, even at like when I was like the early 2000s, it was absolutely feasible to train jiu-jitsu part-time, you know, 4 days a week and win the black belt world championships. You know, there was guys doing it back then. Like that was the end of that. You know, they became professional athletes not too long after I started. You know, and it was like so I like at the beginning we were doing really well as being amateur athletes. You know, well, those of us who were still amateur, because there was guys that were looking to be pros. You know, like Elliot and Tyler and stuff like that. And they were starting to get more deeper down that rabbit hole. But yeah, like by the time I became a purple belt, like you had to be good to win shit, you know.
Who was your main training partner back then?
Well, all the guys, and Jay, Elliot. I think like as those guys started taking off and going their own way, Like there was a period where like Elliot got on like one of the early Ultimate Fighters, and then the MMA guys started really splitting off, and then like, man, like obviously Amal, but then I would go through like Nick Klein. Nick Klein was one of my big training partners. He helped me a lot because he was closer to my size, and I had he was a little bit, he was above me, like he was ahead of me, but we were pretty close.
Right.
You know, we did the same brackets and stuff. And so Klein was one of my instructors, was one of my main coaches for a long time. And Jay, I went through a phase where Jay was my main coach for a long time. Then once I was a purple belt and I took over the Denver school, Busy, Mario Claire he kind of became my coach for a while, and guys there. And then Elliot was always in and out. And like, it was very communal, you know,
Right.
it wasn't just one coach, you know, it was more like, it was a communal situation, and then you were just getting influenced by these guys. You know, Amal was the boss. He was doing everything. I guess as far as main instructors, it was Amal and Jay. You know,
Right.
Elliot got in there eventually too as the primary coaches, I guess. You know, for our generation, and then we all became coaches.
Right.
Everybody else.
So you mentioned that you went to the Denver school. So how did that happen? I mean, did you start coaching at Boulder and then you got offered Denver, or how did that?
Well, I started coaching right away. I was probably, you know, because remember, there wasn't a lot of guys. And so like I was part of that original group, I guess, of people that came up. And so as soon as we made the decision that we wanted to expand the school, he needed coaches, you know. And plus he traveled a lot still. I mean, Amal was still competing himself and traveling and training, you know, and stuff. So Amal was always in and out, and Jay would take over, and, you know, he couldn't do everything all the time. So he needed other coaches. And so I took the Saturday morning class. I was a Saturday morning coach for like ever. It was terrible because I worked Friday nights.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah.
Saturday nights till 2 a.m. in a bar, and then turning around and teaching
Yep.
class in the morning.
My men would be like, all right, suckers, don't piss me off. This is the move. But yeah, so like that's actually a funny story too, because I had just graduated college. This was 2004, and I had just graduated college, and I got my first job in IT that lasted 9 months. That's as long as I ever worked in the industry, 9 months for level 3 communications in Boulder as a security analyst there. And I'm so glad. It was brutally terrible job. I'm not cut out for corporate environment, man, for sure. I was sitting in the computer lab, and Amal calls me up, and he's like, hey, I'm thinking about opening up another school. Or I'm opening up another school. I want you to run it. Now, I don't know how many people they asked before me. I would imagine a lot, and they'll turn them down. But the thing is that like going back to the beginning, I mean, like, I want to have a gym, you know, like
Right.
This is what I want to do with my life someday. And I thought that this was a good opportunity to learn the biz, you know, and do it, you know. And so like he calls me up and he's like, yeah, I want you to run it. And I just got this job. Like, I mean, I'm not like, I'm just like, this is like 9 months in and making a lot of money. Like, we're set. I'm set up for life. My life is complete now. Like, cause I'm with Sarah at this point. We actually, I think we were still renting a house, but like Sarah was a guidance counselor in high school for 10 years. So she's tenured and she's making bank, you know, as a tenured high school guidance counselor. And like, I'm making bank, and we're like, our life is going to be good. Right. We're set. And, Amal calls me up and he's like, yeah, I want you to run the gym. And he's like, how much are you making over there? And I told him, I don't remember how many thousands a month I'm making, you know. And he's like, yeah, well, I can't pay you that. And I'm like, well, hold up, you know, because I'm clearly not happy at this place. So I'm like, well, hold up, what are we talking about here? He's like, well, this is what he said. He said, go home, add up all your bills, add like $300 to it, and that's what I pay you. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to talk to Sarah about this, you know. But then I hung up and I called Sarah right up, and I was like, this is what he offered, and she was like, Jesus. And I was like, well, before we say no, we've been talking about this for a long time that we want to have a gym someday. And if we really want to do that, this is it. This is the step. This is where it happens. If we don't take this step, it's probably never going to happen. This is the deciding factor right here. This is the life decision. And she was like, and she was like, we talked a little bit about money and stuff like that and realized, yeah, we're going to be okay. And she's like, all right, let's do it, which is incredible. So I called them all back like 20 minutes and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And he was like, really? Excuse me. And and that was it. That was all it was. I mean, it was that. Like, he called me up out of the blue, just asked a wild fucking question, and like I took the wild freaking chance, and that was it. I told him he had to wait 2 weeks. I said, because I said I don't want to just bail on these people. So like I hung up the phone, went right in the office, said I'm leaving. This is my 2 weeks, and they said okay, and that was it.
Bye.
That was, because obviously I'm still training at night, and like I think I might have still been teaching. I don't even remember, but like and then we just got that Denver gym going, and like we had no fucking idea what we were doing then. Like we thought we knew what we were doing back then, and like I felt really good about it, but like looking back now, it's like, man, like again, everything is the Wild West. It's crazy, and yeah.
And so what does that look like? I mean, people know our school. People have maybe been to other schools. I've been to the new Denver location where it's basically.
Well, it wasn't there. That wasn't there was a different Denver location. They moved the gym since I left. Because we were in
so it was the same kind of thing. And you were telling me before it was like 2 mats the size of fold-out mats, and you guys had classes going all the time.
No, well, the first time, the mat that we had was probably like half the size of ours. And maybe a little bigger, maybe about 2/3, but it was cool. It was cool for a long time. And when I was there, it didn't blow up. It didn't blow up until after I left. Because they wound up taking over. There was a smoker friendly next door, or like a smoke shop, and they took over that place, busted the wall down, put another mat, and that's where they had the little mat that was like crazy. And then I remember, I think I brought Dave Tofty down to Colorado early in our career when they were still at that location, and I went in there, man, and it was off the hook. I couldn't believe it. Like, the place was packed. It was non-functional. The place was packed. It was totally foggy because it was so fogged up from sweat, and they had the main mat going. I think they had a jiu-jitsu class and a kickboxing class going on simultaneously on the same mat. And then Elliot had his advanced no-gi training, which was a mat the size of a freaking bathroom. I mean, like there was like 20 people on it, and like it was sweaty, soaking wet. You couldn't do anything. You were sliding all over the place. And I was like, I told Elliot, and then like there was a new person coming off the mat, and he sat him on a bench right in the middle of this mayhem and tried to present him right there, like sign him up. And I remember talking to Elliot afterwards. I was like, bro, like, are you kidding? Like, this is non-functional. I was like, what the hell's happening here? He's like, I know, it's crazy. It's off the hook. And I think it was like, I think it was like not too long after that they wound up opening up. They might have already been in the process of trying to get another place by then. And but it was nuts. And that's when I came back and I was like, holy crap, we need to up our game. And when that all ended, another kickboxing and yoga class went on, and then another kickboxing class right after. And I was like, Jesus. Yeah. So that's when I realized, man, like, there's jiu-jitsu in business as well. Like, you got to be a black belt in running the school too, not just kicking people's asses.
So how did you make it to Fargo?
Man, Sarah's from here. She was from here, and we had after we had G.
Right.
Because we were like, all I wanted to do was stay in Colorado and open a gym for Amal. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to run an Easton gym, and that was it. And we were thinking about running a gym for him or running our own gym under him. Right. I wanted to run our own gym under him. And we were looking at different places like Centennial and stuff like that, and we were but the thing is, when because there was no other gyms then, it was just Denver and Boulder, and when we had G, Sarah suddenly changed her tune like a little bit. Like she suddenly now wanted to be like around her family and like all this kind of stuff. And so I was like, okay, you know, she wanted to be around family because like we were the first of our friends group of that whole crew to really, one of the first. I don't know if we were the first or one of the first, but like nobody had kids. You know, like there wasn't even too many married people. So like there was only a couple of people that were just starting to get married. Nobody was, I think we were one of the first to get married, Finney and Tessa. You know, I don't even think Nick and everybody were married yet back then. And nobody had kids. So like we were one of the first ones to get married, one of the first ones to have the kids. So like we didn't want to have this separation, you know, where like, oh well, they're married and have kids now, you know, we'll be seeing them around, you know. and so like I think Sarah started panicking about that a little bit and not having support and things like that. So like she wanted to move to somebody's family. And she wasn't hip on moving to New Jersey. So because it's a little overwhelming for her. My family's a little overwhelming for her, and New Jersey in general. It's a little fast paced. So she wanted to come to North Dakota, and I was like, sweet, doesn't matter to me. We'll go anywhere. Yeah. You know, we can do a gym anywhere. It doesn't matter to me. You know, and yeah, we just came we made the decision. We made the decision to move about a year out. Because I remember I set up the Fargo BJJ website and started setting up, started advertising and creating an email list and all that kind of stuff like a year before we moved here. When we opened in 2008, I already had like 100 people like on a waiting list ready to go. That's awesome. So we opened up like day one and just rocked it out.
And that was August 2008, right? I mean, you recently posted that picture to Facebook of your first class.
Our first class was August 2008.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that was at the 13th Avenue spot,
yep,
right?
13. Yep.
Yeah, because I remember, because I was in college at the time, so I graduated college from Morehead State in 2008, and I remember when that place opened up because I used to drive that way. There was stuff like the mall and stuff. Coming over from Morehead, I would drive by there all the time, and I was like, oh, so like there's a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu place there. That looks cool. And I remember, I think it was at some point, I'm trying to remember when I talked to, because I knew Ben Keene from college, and I'd heard that Ben was training there. I was like, oh, dude, you train there? And I ended up getting connected with him, and then I ended up working with Bailey at one point in time. And Bailey had mentioned, he's like, oh yeah, you should come in and train. You should come in and train. And ended up being, I think it was like 2014 when I actually ended up coming in and doing a class. It was a long time, but I remember I always knew where it was because I drive by it all the time, and I was like, oh man, the place was cool.
Yeah, that was a good spot, man. I wish we could have stayed there. It was just like we got just like new to business. So got a bad deal. And just didn't have our stuff together yet on like business wise. So we had to bail on that place. But like, it's a shame because that was a really nice spot. And we'd be able to hang there no problem now, but it's all right. Good time.
So we had this question. I think we answered it on one of our last ones, Rob and I. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good one to just wrap up, and then we got some hot seat questions for you. But what is the most meaningful experience for you during your jiu-jitsu journey? And so we answered it from a coaching perspective, but also a personal perspective. So however you want to take that, if you want to answer it from both as an instructor and as just your own personal journey.
Man, I think that I already basically touched on that, man. I mean, like just the experience of going through that time period, I think is like one of my favorite experiences with the jiu-jitsu. Like the question is like, what's my favorite experience?
What is your most meaningful jiu-jitsu experience?
I think just going through what we went through at that time in jiu-jitsu history with those people. I mean, it was great. It was like, they always say that like you're living the best times. Like what do they say? Like the golden age or the best time of your life. Those were the days, kind of thing. You're living your best days right now. Like they always say that. Right. And like you don't realize it then, but I look back now and it's like those were really the freaking best times, man. Because everything was so new and like it was really like you against the world. It was us against the world back then. It was awesome.
Right. But I mean, life can't be much better when you're just training all the time, right?
Like you didn't care. Like there was like no concern for the future whatsoever.
Right.
Like it's like I'm gonna live in a garage, work out, and train jiu-jitsu all day, every day. That's all I want in life, and just make it happen.
Right.
just make it happen. It's the thing. It's the thing that like, and it's funny because I'll talk with Shion, or I've talked with people about this before. It's like, man, I moved my life around to be able to accommodate my goal, which was to be able to work out. I just wanted to live and train and work out. That's all I wanted to do. So I adjusted my life to support that. Amal, man, he moved to Brazil to learn this martial art that nobody knew what it was. He's like, I got to do that. And then he came back to America and he wanted to get his black belt. He would fly to Brazil, multiple times. He'd go to New York from Denver like every month, and like you do what you got to do to make things happen. And then, he's not rich either. I think he even worked in the bar at one point. So like you do what you got to do, live the way you got to live. And if you really want something, you make it happen. You don't complain about it. And like, it never even concerned, I don't think it ever even considered anybody fucking complaining about anything. It was great, but then when, it's funny because, well, like somebody will come in and be like, oh, I really would like to train, but like, it's too long of a drive from like Detroit Lakes or some shit, and it's like I can't stand hearing that shit, but it's a generational, like it's me, like I like, like if that's all I had to do when I was coming up, I'd be happy, man. Holy shit. Only drive from Detroit Lakes, that'd be spectacular. I'd be here 7 days a week. But like, hey, it's like I said, it's a different scene, yeah. It's a different scene now.
It's kind of weird to me where we have these conversations with people and I think, we're all like-minded, but, I remember years ago you asked me like, hey, how could I have handled your first class better? So when I started, it was you came in, you took your intro class. It was actually a class. It wasn't anything private. And then afterwards, you would go and you'd ask, very similar to how they do it now, hey, do you want to sign up? And I said, yeah, absolutely, I'll sign up. And you asked me, how could we have made that better for you? I said, you guys had me from the minute. Like I did my research. I was ready to go. I walked in. Like that just happened to be my first day was the first time I could come in. And so, yeah, I was ready to sign up. And you were telling us the story about how Amal came to you one time and said, hey, I'm gonna increase the monthly dues. You remember that story?
Oh, that was just a hypothetical. That didn't really happen.
But that didn't really happen.
No. Like, no, because I was going to say like, and this is just like my spin on a story that I think most people tell their students, back in the day, like I was at Ricardo Almeida's school in New Jersey. We all went up there. Another great thing, Amal used to take us everywhere. It was spectacular. I was up training with Ricardo's school. And I remember one of the things he was talking about was, what if, he said, what if Renzo, it told him he could train for free until he gets a black belt. Then when he gets a black belt, just pay me whatever you think it was worth. Man, it's crazy. He's like, it'd be millions, it'd be priceless. There's no price you could possibly put on it because everything he has is because of Renzo training him.
Right.
His school, his life, his children, like his life, everything. I mean, like there's everything. You can't put a price on it. And that's the kind of thing. It's like, how do you convey that to someone when they first walk in? It's impossible. Like like if you tried to pump that into someone's head, it'd blow up. Like they wouldn't even believe you if you tried to tell them that it's going to have, if they stay here, it's going to have that kind of an effect on them.
Right.
And it's the same thing. I tell the story that like if Amal came in one day, like we didn't have money. Like I said, like the background now, like if Amal came into the group and said, guys, I'm sorry, but like I don't even know what it was. I think it might have been like 89 back then or something, or 79 or something. It was, and like he's like, I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to price it up to $1,000 a month. Like, I mean, you'd hear a lot of him and haw, and people would be like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm all, oh man, But like, I don't think anybody would consider quitting. Like, it would be like he'd walk out.
They'd be like, "Okay, we got to figure this out now."
He'd walk out of the room, and we'd be like, "Okay, what the fuck how are we gonna get $1,000? Like, what are we gonna do? Like, because and that would be it. And like, I guarantee you, we'd all come up with it. I'd have to get another job.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna have to get creative at the front door. But
I even think that for people who don't necessarily own a school, like Ricardo Almeida, who's one of Renzo's guys, who there's that funny thing on YouTube and Facebook floating around where he tapped Danaher out that way back in the day. He tapped him out with a rear naked choke.
Yeah,
That's
Danaher's like a blue belt.
Yeah.
Well,
He's got the headgear on and the mullet.
Oh, for sure. Ricardo's a black belt.
I know that training said that footage has floated around before. I think that was when Almeida was prepping for Pancrase in Japan.
No doubt. But just that, like somebody who maybe is a black belt or, even a purple belt, brown belt, and they don't necessarily own a school. Maybe they've instructed a little bit, but maybe they're just a hobbyist. I think you could do that same question and say, hey, how much is that belt worth to you? And I think just about everybody would say priceless, right?
I'd hope so.
Because even you, I mean, yeah, jiu-jitsu's given you your entire life. I mean, you said outside of the military, the only real job you've had, you worked for 9 months. But, if somebody said, hey, everything, all the knowledge that's part of your black belt, I'll write you a check and I automatically get that, right? And then you have to start over. Would you take that deal?
No way, man. There's no way.
Right. Exactly.
I would just lose all my knowledge of everything.
You would lose all your knowledge of jiu-jitsu. And I would just write you a check. Whatever you wanted, I have a blank check. And then I just absorb all your jiu-jitsu.
I don't think there's anybody. With,
no, of course not. Right?
That would take that.
Right.
No, for sure.
Yeah, because I think it's like you said, it's part of the experience, right? Where, I think even of my time, one of the questions we got was, these white belt questions. What would you do differently if you could start over again? I was like, I think all my experiences up until this point have made me who I am, better or for worse. So, yeah.
And they're important. They're important. Yeah. Like even the failures and the bad things. Like I said, the only thing I would do is try and convince myself to be a little bit smarter with my health.
Right, recovery stuff.
But I certainly would still be doing the crazy things. I would just be trying to not get hurt. Maybe be a little bit focused.
Do you got those hot seat questions, Rob?
I do. Hold on.
You want to go through those?
We can keep going and then split it into 2 episodes.
Oh.
So 2-parter.
You want to call this one and then do a second one, or do you want to keep going?
We can. I mean, we got 90 minutes. It's kind of been about the tail end, so we can do it. We can do a couple of hot seat questions.
All right.
So this is basically like this or that, right? You got to pick one, and you can justify it or not. It's up to you. All right. Which hot seat question number 1: gi or no gi?
Gi.
Figured.
What does that mean?
It's just funny.
Because I've had this conversation with him. I would have guessed that that's what he picked.
Well, I would pick gi, but I love no gi. But if I could only do one and compete in both, it would be the gi. Historically, I have a much better win and finish record in no gi actually, and most of our training back in the day was in the gi. And I competed. We didn't do a lot of no gi, but we competed no gi a lot. And like I said, my winning record, my win-loss record, and my submission percentage is much higher in no gi.
Something interesting you said to me, and I think maybe just different, but you said that as you've aged, you tend to prefer no gi as well because you think it's easier on your body.
Well, people debate this. Like a lot of people think that no gi maybe be harder or whatever. All of my injuries have come from the gi. There's no question. I think a lot of it depends on your style, because if you're an offensive attacking kind of person, I think you'll find gi is easier. If you're more of a defensive guy, I think you'll find no gi easier. I find no gi to be way easier than gi, substantially. It's because I'm a very, very fundamentally oriented defensive fighter. I'm concerned about not being held in position and being able to get out of position, and that is easy as hell in no gi. It's very hard to be held down. I'm not concerned with finishing, which is ironic because my finishing percentage is way higher in no gi. But if I'm gonna look at trying to not be pinned and trying to not be put in bad position and be able to easily escape bad position once I'm in it, the gi is not the place for that, with all those grips and pins and all the lapel shit. And it's a pain in the ass.
Right.
And my jiu-jitsu is more fundamentally oriented. I have a much more fundamentally sound game. I don't do a lot of fancy stuff, which is much more conducive to no gi. The no gi, because of the lack of grips, has has maintained more fundamentally sound than the gi game. The gi game has become obnoxious, you know, because of all
Or
the
cool.
Yeah.
like
yeah.
cool, like it's cool, man. It's cool shit, but like it's really separated itself from like real fighting. And like for me, jujitsu's always been around real fighting and martial arts in general, because my whole love for martial arts was the fighting aspect of it. Like I went through phases when I was younger in karate and stuff like that, where especially in the pre-internet day, I talked about the mystique. I was really infatuated with that Eastern philosophy culture, and like, I thought, I wanted to be like, maybe go to the Buddhist temple or something, the Shaolin temple at one time. And like, I think every teenager in the 80s thinks that. But like, ultimately, I evolved into like, what do I really want out of martial arts? And I want to be able to fuck people up. So that's, I want to be able to kick people's asses. I want to fight. I want unarmed combat, is the ultimate expression of challenge in sport, in my opinion. So like, that's what I always pursued, so I pursued the martial arts that led to that. And then of course, when I get to jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu was the ultimate expression of that. So yeah, and then like that's what my focus is in, because like there's too much stuff. I can't be interested in being like a functional performance and Middle Eastern or Far Eastern philosophy and like what they're doing in the Shaolin Temple these days. Like I can't keep track of all that shit. I just want I just want to fight, and I want to be good at fighting, like physical, like the physical function of the martial art. I even went through a period where I didn't even call it martial art. I called it martial science, because martial science is the war fighting aspect, the science of fighting. Like when you say martial art, it implies like all this religious and spiritual philosophical stuff, which I basically walked away from like in my 20s. So like I just want to have the physical ability.
Right.
And that's what I focus on.
Right.
So.
All right. We're gonna move to other questions. I'm not gonna ask you the old school or new school question, because I'm pretty sure I know it.
I kind of want you to ask him that. That's why I wrote it.
All right, let's do it. Old school or new school?
Well, the thing is, I like new school. I think like evolution is important. Like you can't be stagnated, because that's what the problem with the traditional martial arts was. You have to evolve. The only thing is you got to make sure that your evolution is heading in the right direction. It's got to be functional. When you take away the performance, then the evolution dies. Like what happened was with traditional martial art. Like if you go back to like the 1970s, excuse me, if you go back to like the 1970s and look at anybody who was training taekwondo in the 1970s, they were freaking badasses. Those guys were real fighters. By the end of the 80s, by the 90s, it was a joke. It was childcare by that point. You know what I mean? So what happened? Like they stopped fighting. like the Olympics, became unrealistic. The sport taekwondo became unrealistic. The folk, like the real, I know what I'm trying to say. I'm doing a terrible job of saying it. The actual test, to what's real or not, like got taken away, and then it got left to people's bag. Like you can do whatever you want now. There's no threat of being exposed. There's no, the performance isn't being judged under crucial criteria anymore. And with Brazilian, and that's the same thing. Like with the traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, it was becoming non-functional, and judo and things like that. And then when the Gracies, and when it expanded like that, they threw all that tradition to the side, and they were fighting in the streets, man. It's funny because there's that meme that I like that goes around that every time somebody complains about sportsmanship in jiu-jitsu, there's a meme with there's a screenshot of that brawl on the beach with Hickson and Hugo Duarte, and it says like, and it says sportsmanship in jiu-jitsu ? This martial art was started by fighting it was started by like dojo storming people's gyms and choking motherfuckers out on the beach. Like what's sportsmanship? What the hell are you talking about? But like when people wanted to actually be able to have a successful business doing it, everything has to settle down, and you got to the problem was they wanted to be recognized as a real sport now.
Right.
You
there's
know,
that legitimacy where there's other factors that also influence what's going on, not just okay, well, who wins a fight? It's like, okay, well, fight's a fight,
Yeah.
as opposed to is this a viable sport? Is this a viable business? Is it, some of those other things that end up impacting it? So does that here's another question for you. Is it do you prefer like either watching or competing in tournaments? Do you prefer sub only or points?
I don't care, man. I'll compete in anything, any rules. I don't care. Like, and that's the way I've always been, even before jiu-jitsu. But like, I just like to fight and compete. I love competing. Like, it's really hard for me to be old and hurt. Like, I'm one of those guys that don't age well. Um, I I see. As a matter of fact, I prefer that there doesn't become a standardized rule set. Like, I prefer that, like, it's points, it's no points, it's these rules, it's that rules, everything changes all the time, because that keeps evolution flowing and that keeps people well-rounded. I think as soon as you standardize something, you immediately lose the effectiveness of it, because everything that doesn't help you achieve your goal in that rule set gets thrown to the wayside, even if it's important for something else. And that's really like what I was trying to say before with the other martial arts. As soon as something becomes standardized, it just goes out the window. So I'm avidly against standardization in jiu-jitsu. I'm hugely opposing to like jiu-jitsu ever being in the Olympics or anything like that. I'm like avidly anti jiu-jitsu in the Olympics. That would be the worst thing that could ever happen. Yeah, because like, and this is another pet peeve. People that complain about rules at a tournament in the rules meeting. You can't do a knee bar. You can't do this. You can't do that. It's like,
I thought this was a jiu-jitsu tournament.
It's like, man, because again, it's a generational thing. Like, I came up where like you rolled into a place, we're not even sure if they're having a tournament for grapplers, and then you roll in. There's like, sometimes you just have to throw it together right there, and then it's like, okay, these are the rules. You can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. This is allowed. Don't do this. And you're like, okay, I'm good. Let's go. And you just got to wing it like that. And you just got to be able to, like, you got to have a full game, and you got to have the self-control enough to be able to say, okay, I can't grab a guy's knee, so I'm just not going to do it. And like, you mean to tell me that like the guy arguing about the knee bar in the clip is like his whole chance of winning, like his whole purpose for being there revolves around that one move? Like, it's make or break. Like, man, the guy shouldn't be competing at all then, if like that's the only thing, if that's going to make or break him winning this fucking thing. And like, I like the skill. I like the ability for someone to be able to, I think a cool tournament format would be roll the dice for your rules on the spot. Like, here's the rules for this round. Next round, who knows what you're going to get. You got to be able to play it, man. You got to go. It's all leg locks, nothing else. It's all of the body. Gi, no gi. You got to be able to go at a moment's notice at any time with anything. I mean, like, you should be able to do that. Anybody who's competent should be able to do that at any time. So yeah. So like, I'm not a big fan of like any rules. I don't care.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. It's not going to affect me.
All right. So takedown or guard pull. What are you doing?
Man, I wish I was better at takedowns. I have to pull guard sometimes because like I can't get a takedown, but like I would love to be able to take somebody down. I don't think one's better than the other. I think they're both advantageous and they both have their place. There's definitely times when guard pull is the right choice. In modern MMA, or not in modern MMA, in a modern sport jiu-jitsu, obviously the guards are very dangerous in their most dominant position. So pulling straight into one is an advantage, and getting a takedown into someone's most dangerous position is not always an advantage anymore, like, unless you can, and it's hard to do a clean takedown straight to side controller to mount in the gi. It's a little bit more doable in no gi. I mean, you're a little safer. Like I said, it's more defensive or offensive, like the no gi. It's a little safer to get a takedown. But I mean, yeah, and in a sports setting with points, limited time, like it's understandable why people pull guard. Let me put it that way.
Sure.
It's definitely understandable for sure.
All right, last one. $1 million match. So $1 million, you win this match. what are you doing?
Pulling half
Like,
guard.
Okay. Pulling half guard to sweep.
Pulling half guard. Yep. Well, what's
Okay.
like what's the point?
say like essentially what's your game plan?
Well, who am I fighting?
Just some guy. So some guy, big
Gordon
tournament.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Gordon Ryan. You win your million
Like
bucks.
that question is irrelevant, because if it was some guy or Gordon Ryan, I'm still pulling half guard and sweeping. It's just the question of, am I going to do it or not? Because if you say like $1 million, if I want that $1 million, that's my best move. So I'm pulling half guard sweeping, for sure.
Right.
I've been pulling half guard and sweeping since I was a white belt.
All right. Well, that's it. Thanks again for coming on. It's been I even learned some stuff today, because you and I have had a lot of conversations about some of the history stuff, but I got a couple of things that I didn't know about. So this is awesome.
Cool.
You have anything else you want to say?
We'll do it in the next one.
All right.
All right. Awesome. Well,
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again, and I appreciate everybody listening. Keep following around for the next one, and we'll see you on the next time. Bye.
All right.
Later.